under required approvals, and it be placed as a separate item C2, then moving superintendent informational item to C3.
There's been a motion by Director Garza to remove one of the required approvals, C1-8, and enter it as a separate agenda item. Any second?
I will second that.
Second by Director Johnson.
Are you on? I just was making sure that we can, maybe you should move it up a little bit. I don't know. I know you love Mike.
I don't.
Sorry. I got you out of
Do I see
clear.
it?
Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right, good. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Move on then to public comment. Was there any requests for comment? Item B2, board discussion. First item is the legislative report. Director Stevenson.
I do not have anything at this time.
Okay. Second item is WASDA regional meetings. We chose to keep that in there as a reminder of those meetings coming up. The meetings that made the most sense, I think, October 3rd, and then there was one in November, right?
I thought that we had planned on the November 7th.
I think most people, yeah, felt.
Right.
The board doesn't all have to go to the same one.
True.
That line.
But also, I wanted to check and see if our secretary could inform those that are running for office and to make sure that they keep that open if they're elected, because we would hopefully know results by then, especially if it's not close. Then newly elected people could potentially come.
So are you saying that make sure it's registered, but not with a specific name, but a placeholder?
Yes, registered with placeholders, and then that those people that are running for office are specifically invited to keep that date available.
One thing we might be able to do is register District 1, District 2, District 3, District 4, District 5, and then regardless of.
Yes, I think that sounds great.
All right. Next item is the September board linkage. Believe this was for Ken.
I and Tyson have for September. I got hold of a group tonight. They don't meet until the first part of October, but it would be before the next regularly scheduled board meeting though too, so I can bring a report back.
Okay.
What group is that?
It would be the Adams County Development Council.
Great.
Sounds good.
They're meeting at the hospital on the 10th.
Can the audience hear his mic? Yes?
Test, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Is that working okay?
Sorry, thanks.
So just as a reminder, I'm just going here to give everyone a heads up on the October linkage. And that's Mike Garza and Jen Stevenson for October.
Do you have a time on that, Jim?
It's 6 p.m. at the Othello Hospital downstairs.
Mike, do you have any ideas or specific thoughts on who you wanted to go and visit?
I hadn't really thought about it yet, but
Okay.
I can think of something that
All right,
you and I can go.
right, that'd be
I'll
good.
make contact with you.
Okay,
So
perfect.
I'm listening to the 10th here. Would we do it like latter part of the month?
That would be fine.
Does it have to be in October?
It could still be, I mean, we could even talk the same, at the same meeting about
Okay.
their September and our October. I don't see why that would be a problem.
No problem.
Yeah, I think it was just decided that we would try to each month.
Okay.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, I'll get it.
Reach out.
perfect.
Okay, the next item is the Waukeeta School Board Visit Site Draft Agenda. Just want to see if the board has any recommendations on that.
I like that they took some initiative and came up with some, a slightly different schedule. I mean, not drastically different or anything, just made the classroom visits dramatically longer, and then a list of what worked, what didn't work, so that we could provide some feedback as well.
recommendations on that, we'll stick with that agenda. Oh, so the question I just was asked was the same format as far as students that we visit, students that show the growth. Okay. Are we clear with what that is? As far as what?
Yeah, on the grade level, except for kindergarten. Most growth.
I think it was 2.
Two.
Yes, perfect.
And then the next item is student rep communication plan. I think that was something that was brought up. Jen, you said you and Taylor would come up with a plan for communicating that out to potential student reps.
So we've been in contact and came up with a couple of phrases short phrases that could potentially be put in morning, what's it called?
Morning announcements.
Thank you. One could be, do you want a great community service on your resume or college application? And then another, so that there's a variety of, like every 3 days it rotates to something else. Do you have opinions? Do you like sharing them and discussing other people's opinions? And then follow-up would be, come to the school board student rep info meeting on October 7th at 7:30 in the OHS library, which open to other short phrases.
Yeah, what I think really, something that's very crucial is to keep the phrases, because this is going to go in the morning announcements. So keep it very concise, but clear. Because there's some announcements where you hear the same thing over and over and over again, and I do it too. You just tune it out, and you just know that they're talking, and then somebody will say a joke of the day, and that's it. So I feel like it's really important that we get that out. I want to talk with leadership about getting flyers out too, so we can get it in a variety of different medias instead of just the announcements, because not everybody can hear them. Because there's band classes, welding classes, so on and so forth. So yeah. Still, I have another person who came up to me who was thinking about it, so I have 2 people without media coverage.
Great. Do you want me to get this info to Mr. Tovar, and then you talk to Mr. whoever you need to get it to Othello High
Yeah, that'd be good.
announcements?
I could talk to Stutzman, because he's a leadership teacher.
Great.
So you mentioned an informational meeting. That's the training you're talking about, right?
Yes.
I like the idea of the informational meeting, but maybe there should be an informational meeting that then explains the training. Like a short meeting where they can come and say, okay, tell me about what you're talking about in this announcement. Can you give me some more information? And maybe you could have an informational meeting, let them know then that there's a training on the 7th if they're even more serious about it and want to come to it. Some might come there and say, we're just here for information. We didn't know we were here to train.
Yes.
There's one conflict with that would be if the meeting would have to be sometime this week, because next week, if I'm getting this right, homecoming is coming up and it's packed. There is literally no room. Yeah, it would be next week is homecoming week, so there's literally no room to put it any other time other than sometime this week.
We just thought.
Yeah.
It is an informational meeting and a training at the same time.
Could be in the morning.
So, and the problem would be then Taylor would have to, or someone else would have to go to Desert Oasis as a possible information giver.
Yeah.
Yep, actually, just a suggestion, but if, sounds like the time frame would be pretty tough. So.
Mm-hmm. It would be.
I think we're already super tight on time frame.
When's do you have a deadline on when you want another student rep? Specifically?
Right away.
Oh, perfect.
Last July.
Sounds good. All right.
And then we're gonna need, I think, aren't we getting another one in January as well? Because that's when Taylor's term is up?
I don't think Taylor's ever told us her intent, or not, definitely said that's the intent.
Oh, I thought, my understanding was that my term was up in December because I thought we already talked about this. And
When you signed up for it, I think, my memory was it was just talk to your parents and decide what you want to do.
yeah.
When you signed up for it, you you were signed up through the end of the year.
Yeah.
But with this change, and you were given the opportunity to, so it sounds like, yes, you plan on being done at the end of this.
I honestly think
Fiscal
it
year.
would be best for the board, because I know that I'm not going to want to do anything after, because college is coming up and all my classes are ending, and I just feel like I feel like I'd just be detrimental if I were to stay the whole time, if you know what I mean. I feel like a fresh face would probably be the best for the board.
So would be putting one in right away,
Mhm.
and then, like, if we could pick two with the, potentially, if the pool was good enough, pick one to start right away, and then another one to start in December, January.
If the two people that have talked to me, one is a junior and the other one is a freshman. So if something happens and ideally if those two people were the people, then you could have the junior do it, or no.
I
Have
think
the
that there's a
freshmen do
few
it.
others that are interested
Really?
that hasn't, yeah, because I know of a freshman, I think you had talked
I've
of
got a
a,
sophomore that's
sophomore.
interested.
Really?
so.
I'll send him your way.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we go.
And hopefully there's others and more out there as well.
Oh, wait, I have a quick question. If you were to do the person that would start right away, would that be an older student, or would you want to put a younger student that would start right away? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't think there's stipulation either way.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
One other thing, regarding that informational training meeting, can you resend, I don't know if you did send that training, we were gonna revamp the policy governance training? You did? Can you resend that, please? I don't know if I,
That was
did you
gonna
see
be my
it?
next question, where
Yes.
you're at with that.
didn't
I got it
see
last night.
Okay,
So
okay, maybe I just need to check.
I would say that the board probably wants to see what the final product is, so our next board meeting is going to be after that training, so if you guys maybe send it to me, and then I'll distribute to the board once you're finished with it, and then get a kind of a consensus from the board if it looks good to go.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, anything else on that?
No.
Okay, then the next item is the conference update. Mike wanted to share with us the conference that he was able to attend.
Yeah. First and foremost, I want to thank our president for allowing me to attend the NALEO conference. NALEO is the National Association for Latino Elected Officials. I was intrigued. It was emergency response and management, and I was intrigued. My main purpose, the reason for wanting to go was there was two tracks. There was a municipal and an education one. And the education one, I thought was going to have a lot of material on, unfortunately, mass shootings and things of that nature on school campuses, which it turned out that there was. As always, you go to a conference like this and you come back thinking you're going to change the world, and I was glad that I went. Learned a lot. One thing that you come back with golden nuggets, and all emergencies are local, I learned. People seem to think that what happened in this town is going to happen the exact same way in your town, and every emergency is local. I learned that. And it made me think. I know I texted Dr. Hurst from over there that as soon as I got back, I wanted to take a look at our safety policy, see where we're at. I know we're trying to amend it as far as what we're gonna do about arming administrators and all this other stuff. I know we've had a community forum. I don't know if that's been totally ironed out. I don't recall seeing a final product. I know that it's a work in progress. So it really brought home, how prepared are we as a city? Because I did attend a couple of the municipal breakouts, and as a district. It was very interesting how, if we're not involved with our local planning committee, we should be. A lot of the stuff that was there was, of course, they had FEMA there, and they were talking about hurricanes and fires, and they were talking about tornadoes and how all that begins, and your governor's got to declare the emergency before FEMA even. Anyway, and I thought, okay, well, this really doesn't have to do a lot with our school. That was the first half a day. But then when it came to the educational tract, it was interesting to learn that although we may not have a hurricane or a tornado that's going to come wipe out our city, hopefully, We do have some stuff around us that might constitute an emergency where there'll have to be coordination between the school district and the folks that will be handling, you know, I know that there's an ammonia tank over here at the potato processing plant that may become an emergency to all of us. And are we prepared? I'm sure we have representatives from the district that are involved in on these committees, and if we don't, we should. The last session on the education track was creating a safer school campus, and there are an alarming number of acts of violence being committed on school grounds across America, and a few of the things that were mentioned that have happened elsewhere resonated at home. I know we've gotten an alert about somebody on campus and things of that nature. Their scenarios were a lot more serious in nature, and I think that I'll take a look at our policy. I know, Rob, you mentioned before, hopefully when you come back from a conference, it brings up a revamp of a policy or an addition of a policy or something like that, and I really want to take a look or elaborate more, look more in-depth to our safety one, and see if there's anything there. I mean, I brought back quite a few resources of things that our counselors can do, even from a social emotional place where if there was some sort of emergency and kids are displaced and, you know, they got to show up the next day to school, and how we would handle things like that. So a lot of information, something that it's not related to school or anything, but one of the keynotes at lunch on Friday was the state representative from El Paso, where they had that shooting at Walmart. And he basically gave his speech was on how he handled that. And it really brought it home to where he had to set politics aside. He says, I'm a staunch Democrat, and almost everybody I dealt with was a Republican, but we were in the same room. And at the end of the day, he basically went through what happens and who gets contacted and what agencies come in and everything else. And it's kind of scary the way he brought it down. I mean, the gentleman, Cesar Blanco, he got very emotional, and it was like, he says, even now I tear up remembering the devastation and everything else. So it was one of those things where I thought, man, I hope we never have to go through this, not just as a city, God forbid, a school district, but a little more, on me anyway, to be a little more pertinent and try to look into our safety policy a little more. At the end of the conference, I was asked to join their board of directors, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I need some time to think about this. I have a pending election, so anyway, no, I had a great time, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to attend. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Was that a national conference?
Yes,
And where was that one at?
in Long Beach, in California.
Great.
They had several people that had just, that were involved with Hurricane Harvey, like that first morning. And it was just, then get back and Houston gets hit again. And even as I turned the news on, some of the gentlemen that actually spoke there were in the news again, as like in front of the mic and stuff. So it was like, whoa, you know, I was just talking to that gentleman. But anyway, yeah, there was a lot of information there.
Thank you. All right, item B3, student representative report.
All right. Okay. So I mean, part of my report was about the student reps, so that's kind of out. But one thing that was super interesting is, you know how like we focus a lot on ends policies. There was a meeting. So we have Husky Futures. I'm assuming everyone knows what that is because that's a huge thing. And so they had this presentation. It was last Monday, and they're going through all the slides, and I was like, wow, that seems pretty familiar. Literally all the slides were the ends policies, and it was just talking about what students are supposed to have and the skills that they're supposed to have by the end and when they graduate. So I thought that was interesting, and that was a way I don't doubt at all Mindy Christensen, that wasn't I don't doubt that she didn't do that on purpose. She 100% did. But it's just so amazing that students know what they are. They just don't know them by EL4, EL whatever. They know it by, when we're done, we're supposed to know how to be respectful. We're supposed to know how have this world language, know these 21st century tactics. So I thought that was really interesting that the students were exposed to that without them even knowing. So that's just a little kudos to her. No, that's super amazing. Outside of policy stuff and what's going on at our schools is just we're being swamped. There's homecoming coming up. There's school. There's not that much to report. The meat of my report was in the student representative stuff. So yeah, any questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Cool.
Thanks, Taylor. Okay, we'll move on to item C1, required approvals.
I have some questions before we jump into that. There were some on the accounts payable warrants that I wanted to know some of the details of, and I had asked some of these questions beforehand. There were just some follow-up questions. Power School Group, $12,000. Can you explain what that one is?
There we go. So the Power School Group invoice that is in your AP is for records. So records is basically our online employee profile management system. So instead of having paper employee profiles, we now have them electronically, and we're working towards expanding that as well.
So they were only paper version before.
Yes.
Now there is an online system
Yeah,
as well.
now there's an online system. Pretty much everyone, all the new hires from starting last year, all the new hires are only electronic. They don't have paper files. And we're going to be working towards getting all the old paper files onto the new system as well.
Okay, gotcha. And then modern building, the 68,000.
Portables are expensive to install.
So that was just for the installation
Just
of, okay.
Wahidas and Hiawatha. Yes.
Because in the past, have we typically had maintenance install those and we didn't have time this year, or what?
Off and on, it's usually a combination. I think usually maintenance does a little bit more, but this year that wasn't possible. But
no
they
time.
did quite a bit. They tore down, or kind of, they didn't tear it down, but they disconnected the one that we were removing, and so they did quite a bit of the work, but we did have to contract out for some of it.
Okay, so a higher percentage this time was to the modular company.
Yes.
All right. And then I know that the legal information is in here, changing to Stevens and Clay Law Firm from our former lawyer. Can you give me the details about comparable costs?
Yeah, we had a firm that we dealt with when I was first hired, and they were $275 per hour. Then we went to Rocky. She's a kind of a single source attorney. We found that she lacked the resources, and then there were some availability issues. Also, she was $170 an hour. So this person that we are recommending, Paul Clay, is right around the average of the state, $275 per hour.
Okay, and so you think that the availability issues will no longer be an issue
Absolutely.
with a firm?
With the resume that we have for him that can be made available to the public as well, they have an extensive team that goes very deep, and they're an experienced litigation firm as well.
Okay. I did see that the cost per hour for the different
Yes.
individuals and the different things that they were doing, and so it did look like there was quite a wider range.
And then some of the services also, Director Stevenson, will be dedicated to those who are lower cost per hour. So they have some attorneys that are right around $100 or a little bit more than that.
Okay. And so then there was a conflict of interest clause in the contract, and so how do they, if we went to court with whatever, okay, what am I trying to say? If we had some kind of litigation or some other issue with someone else that they're already representing or that they've recently become to represent, how do they pick preference on who they represent if there's a conflict of interest?
Well, one of the first things for the conflict of interest policy, that really is part of every attorney's kind of their
Blanket,
agreement.
right,
Exactly.
agreement, yes.
But in talking to our legal counsel, what he said is he would typically try to work with both parties. So say, for instance, it's two districts, like Othello and another district, and Paul is representing both, then that represents a conflict of interest. So he'll try to sit down with both districts, depending upon what the issue is. He'll try to work it out. If not, he will recommend to both districts another attorney, skilled attorney, and then they will be actually represented by that other attorney to work on that particular issue.
So both parties would go to different ones, or they would
Yes.
just,
Both parties
Okay.
will be recommended to a different attorney.
okay,
Yes.
that makes that a little bit more clear,
Mhm.
so, okay. Then I think that was all the specific questions pre-approval of required approvals, and then some other questions after.
I got one really quick. This is going back to the memo that we got here.
Yes.
Okay. It says that the number entered was 97274, and it should have been 94274. But the document in front of us has the beginning at 94266 and ending in 97312.
Yes, so that's because the beginning, that first number, that 94266, that is correct. It was, so the way payroll is ran, we have to run one batch that's the checks to the employees.
Okay.
They don't have direct deposits, and then we have to run another batch that pays our vendors, so pays like the insurance company and stuff like that. So it was that second batch that that number was entered wrong. The
Okay.
first
So the
check number.
vendors is what you're saying.
Yes.
And then where can the public find this memo, since we found it on our desks?
They can find it in my office. It's
Okay.
filed with our AP.
Okay.
Okay.
I did have a question as well. On the personnel assignment order number 2, we had a security specialist hired for Othello High School, Martin Garza. I was just curious what his, I guess, job description or what his responsibilities will be, just kind of going off of Mike's thing about the school safety policy.
The security specialists roam the campus. They notify administrators if there is something, what's the word I'm looking for? To be any concerns across the campus that need to be, evaluated by the city or the town. So we currently have security specialists there at the high school, so this would just be replacing that person.
Okay.
Do security specialists always carry walkie-talkies that they could change it to call the police? Because
Yes.
isn't that how the administration currently has
They do have walkie-talkies, yes.
in the office? Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
So along that line, you brought up Martin Garza, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. That's Mike's son. And I have a little bit of a question. I'm sure it's been looked at as far as I want to make sure that we're not engaging in any conflict of interest with his hire. I know that it states a director, spouse, or dependents. I'm guessing Martin is no longer considered a dependent, but I don't know how that's determined by the state.
Correct, he could be employed by the district.
So is it because he's no longer considered a dependent because of his age?
Correct.
Thank you. So I just want to make that clear before we vote on that. Mike obviously needs to abstain, but, so it's clear for the board and the public about that hire. Okay, any other?
So at what age does someone not become a dependent? When they're an adult, when they're an adult and not living in the home? What's the guidelines on that?
My understanding is over 18 and no longer living in the home.
And
Mm-hmm.
both
Correct.
things. Okay. Great. There's enough Garzas. I never would have put the two together, Mike.
And just full disclosure, I had already asked Rob about my statement. As soon as I saw that, I was was gonna abstain anyway, regardless.
Any other questions regarding the required approvals? I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the required approvals.
Been a motion to approve by Director Stevenson,
Second?
second by Director Roylance. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I abstain.
No one opposed, and one abstain. Motion carries 4-0. And now we want to take a moment for opportunity for Paul Oursland, who we just approved as our new STEAM director. So Paul, come on up. This is your chance to talk in front of us, and you may not want the chance, but we're making you take that chance. Yes, have a seat. if you want, or just
You'll need to turn it
the mic.
on. Yeah, and on the bottom and the back, you have to push for a long time usually.
Well, I just want to, is this on?
Really close to you though, sorry.
Well, I just want to say thank you to the Othello School District for all the opportunities I've had up until this point. And I also want to say thank you to the Board of Directors for the opportunity moving forward to get to serve the students and the teachers and the school and community in a different capacity. I'm looking very forward to this position and the ability that I'm going to have to reach all the schools and to just have a larger impact as the STEAM director for the district. And so I just wanted to say thank you and let you guys know that I'm looking very forward to the opportunity that I've been given, and I'm planning to take the position very seriously and to make some good impacts on our students' quality of education. So thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you.
So, just have a question about, I believe, you just said it, Paul, you don't have to finish that. I believe it's possible that both my kids are in his class, and so.
Mine too,
I
I
might
mean,
get in
a
trouble
single,
for
yeah.
voting
Right.
yes on that, but, what are we doing for, to replace him as a teacher?
So, Paul is
Great
a very,
teacher, by the way.
Paul is very dedicated to his students. So during his interview, that was one of the things that he was most concerned about is who would be there to take over in his class. So after the board approval tonight, we will be posting for that position. And then we will have an interview committee for that position, and Paul will help with the transition for that next person taking over his classroom.
All right. I will share that information.
Yeah.
Jen, you got that?
Yes, thank
Are you in
you.
trouble too?
I actually pre-asked that question myself as well, because I was concerned too, yes.
All right. So the next item is item C2. This was pulled from required approvals, District Operating Policy 4218, speakers of diverse languages. Came up in our last board meeting that I was committing to doing a better job looking at those to see that they represent the interest of our community. And also in this one, I was wondering, I've had a little bit of a short discussion with Dr. Hurst about it. Our EL states that we will provide translation services whenever possible. So it's pretty clear. Where this one goes into, there has to be some stipulations. You have to request some services beforehand. This was taken, I'm assuming right out of RCW and WAC law.
Right.
It's one of those situations where I think our board policy has a little more higher expectations. And so two things here, either we look at this and say, okay, this does not fit our policy. It's not as high of expectations as our policy, our board policy, or as a board, we may want to look at this and say, those are good enough, and I think we would want to maybe change our policy to just reference a district operating policy. We have that option. And so I just noticed that I think there's some conflicting statements in it. One of them, the main one, what I saw right off the bat was, if you look at, I think I have the wrong. Oh, that was under procedure. Under the procedure of it, it mentioned something about, for example, school board meetings, but it was really loose on the translation services. I think you had to have a 3 days before you had to let the district know that you wanted services, and then they would provide it. Well, we know at board meetings, we expect it every time. And so that was a little bit of a conflict there, and then the policy itself, I think, might have some conflict. So just wanted to have the board discuss that and get your thoughts on it.
I thought it was interesting that it said, again, this would be in the, what's the P called? P represent?
Procedure,
Procedure,
yes.
okay. So in the procedure, which I guess we don't have to actually approve, we only have to approve the policy. It states that, well, I gotta find it now. 5% or 1,000. I don't know if I'm gonna. Or 1,000 people, then has to have translation of documents. And so I sent questions on ahead about, maybe that's somewhere else. Anyways, how many Mesteco parents do we have? I was curious if we had greater than 5%. And I think it was like 440 or so.
Right around 400 approximately.
So that's almost 10% Mesteco families.
Mhm.
And that we do have a district translator.
We do, Carmela.
Do we have written translation for Mesteco?
You want to speak to that, David?
No, we don't, because they don't have a written language yet. They're working with international groups to develop a written dialect for the Mixtec people. It's Bible translators that go in and do this work, and they have one book of the Bible translated right now. There's 300 different dialects within the region spoken between the villages and the tribes. So the exception on that is if there's no written language, we can't translate in writing. So that, I hope that answers your question.
That leads to a whole other line of questions, but I don't know if they really apply. So they are translated verbally then for everyone that needs it, all of those documents. Do we provide verbal translation then, since there is no written translation?
If a family needs that, yes.
Okay.
A lot of the families, though, speak Spanish as well.
I understand,
so,
right. Many of them speak Spanish, but if they speak Spanish, do they read Spanish? If they don't read their own language?
That's a good question, and not always, but all of our home language visitors, or our home visitors at the schools, my federal program staff, if there's translation services needed during registration or whatever, they will read them the information that, if that is necessary.
Because that's a boatload of info.
Yep, but
every
it's
time.
what we have to do, so
Right.
that's what they
Oh, yeah.
that's what they do.
Okay.
Do you know how many diverse different languages we currently have within the district now, students?
With Mixtec and then some of the tribal languages from Guatemala, about 4 or 5, depending on, there's Mum as well as Mixtec, Spanish, and then English. So if we get, the Mum is a really small number, so we're under all thresholds for the state on that. But once again, they often speak Spanish as well, so.
So for the mom and the other, I'm sorry, what is mom?
I'm gonna get this wrong. I believe it's a tribal language from Guatemala.
Okay. I don't know where I was going.
Okay.
It'll come in a minute.
Okay, so just to remind the board of, our policy EL9 says, using multiple media resources, the superintendent shall not cause or allow failure to establish and maintain strong links with the public in languages reflective of the community, to ensure that they are kept informed of district work and results, and are predisposed to provide support within the community on all district issues. This will include on-site translation services at every opportunity. So it's a very specific sentence that we have, and so I would believe our expectation is district operating policy would match that. And we are allowed to have district operating policy that doesn't match RCW and WAC, it just has to be a higher standard, it can't be a lower standard than the RCW or WAC, and so I just wanna make sure that.
Do we have a specific mum translator and the other, we do not have a mum translator?
No,
Okay.
we have not encountered anyone that just speaks Hmong. They all speak Spanish as well.
But doesn't the DOP 4218 say in their,
In their preferred language.
it says in their preferred?
Well, I mean, that's the intent of it. It can be in their native language or their preferred. It's being able to communicate with the families. So, and I'm not dodging your question, but to speak to your point on the EL, this came about through our consolidated program review. Office of Civil Rights came back and said our policy's outdated and out of compliance, and our ELs don't work for policy for the state. So we have to have some sort of DOP. I'm more than happy to go back and address the issues and make the language in the DOP where applicable match the EL9 specifically. So that's not gonna be a problem. But we've gotta get something in place to close out the CPR review. So that's just kind of the impetus behind the revision on this one, why we did that.
Yeah, I think the board, like I mentioned earlier, the board has an opportunity to, if they wanted to say, you know, we're okay with that language as well, we might wanna modify our EL. So it's really up to the board, and I don't think it has to be done tonight, but I just wanted to be awareness.
Yeah, and even the DOPs, that's a minimum standard. You can, as a practice, you can go above and beyond, but the DOP, like, it may say they have to provide 3 days of, you know, at a minimum to request that, but we could still provide translation at everything all the time, and then we'd still be within the policy.
Is there a video or phone translation available for mum through another source?
Not that I'm aware of in the state of Washington.
Okay.
It's a new,
I just said that was in your,
yes.
that was an option.
And I'm not sure if if those students are back in the district this year. I haven't gotten our demo data from this first count yet for that specific subgroup.
Okay.
But we've had a few in the district over the last couple of years. And by demo data, I mean demographic data, in case somebody didn't understand what I was talking about on
Thank you.
video.
What would the board like to do with this?
I would rather it, even though it's not a board policy, I would rather it be a higher standard than the minimum. I understand that's the minimum that by law has to be required. I would rather the district policies reflect the board policies and be a higher standard, because that's what we're asking. So why would we allow the district policies to be less?
Okay, you think, Ken?
No, I agree. When's EL9 up for review?
I don't know that one memorized. Tyson, what do you think?
Yeah. I think it's,
Mike?
I agree as well.
It sounds like there's a consensus that
Yeah.
we like that. And so we have an opportunity, obviously, to approve this, if we just, with the understanding of Dr. Hurst, that we'd like to see another revision come to us that reflects more of a match with our EL. But I understand getting this approved to,
At this
For that
point,
review.
it's fine. If you want to pull it and I can resubmit it for the next board meeting with the new approved language, that's not going to mess up any sort of timeline.
okay, so that would be, to me, that would be cleaner rather than approve it twice.
I agree, yeah.
So I have no problem doing that.
Is that something that you?
That's great.
Okay.
You can do that.
Okay, so this can be an item that
We just don't
remains,
approve,
for
right?
lack of a motion.
Okay.
Before we move on, I also wanted to just say thank, after the required approvals, I did appreciate that you and your staff thought about the DOP 3122 in regards to a parent's right to choose if their child misses, so the absences for personal reasons has been added back into that, so thank you for that,
Yes, sir.
appreciate that.
Sorry, never mind.
Okay,
It looks like EL9 is October 28th.
coming right up.
So it'll be just in time.
Yay.
All right, so the next item is C3, superintendent informational items. Does the board have any questions for clarification on those items?
On the 4218P, the procedure, B2, parent identification, says schools much determine with, I think it's a typo, it says 30 days of student enrollment and there's a 3. I think it should be schools must determine. I just want to point that out.
Thanks very much, Mike. Taken. And since the comment also from required approvals, we'll also be bringing this one back as well.
Considering, well, it might change your procedures, I guess. Let's think about it. So the other thing that was brought up in that was the reference to the board meetings. Now, if you want to do, if you kept the 3 days, if you felt that was still within what our EL allowed, I would just take out the reference to the board meeting in general, because we definitely don't practice that in board meetings.
Right, under C3 on the procedures one as well, has this always been a policy, students and other minor children under the age of 18 may not serve as an interpreter? Has that always been a policy? Or is that something that's recently been added officially?
That's a good question. I don't know that it's been an official policy, but this one, like in the typo you found, this one we 100% copied from Wasda.
Okay.
So I'll let them know they have a typo in their documentation. We don't often get to do that, but that is, I don't know if that's necessarily newer language. I'd have to look. I don't remember it being in our or in our procedures before, but it is recommended now from WASDA based on new.
So an older sibling that's over the age of 18 could be the translator, just not someone that's currently a student or under 18.
Correct. We don't want to put the burden on the families to provide translation. The onus is upon the district or the building to provide those services. So that's the intent behind this.
When you come back with this, will you have the time? We'll have the thing that you said that then you defined.
Mom?
No, there were so many. I know. I'm sorry. Will you have all the percentage of our current student makeup by then?
Hopefully.
And
if I'll be honest with you
languages.
though, if the n size is too small, if the student sample size is too small, they don't report the data. So if it's below 1%, they'll just say not applicable.
So 1% is like 44 students.
Correct.
Ish. Okay.
So.
Thank you. That would be really, I think, valuable information to have as well anyways. And I know often the district website gets updated with those kinds of things because nonprofits use that for grant writing.
They do. And I will do my best to find that information out for you.
And not just because of that. It's good information, I think, for all of us to have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
One thing I want to bring up, since it will be coming up next month.
Demographic.
EL9.
Was that the word? Squirrel.
When EL9 comes up next month, we state in our EL that we will provide translation services. And as we look at these definitions that the state has, translation is only written. So interpretation would be the oral. So we may want to look at adding that to our EL, just so that apparently our vocabulary is not very vast as a board.
Wow.
Except for Mike.
Well, it's always good to be in check through the state as well.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion on those items?
When I pull these up to look at them in another screen, for some reason it always pulls up, it says DOP 2026, even though I'm looking at DOP 4218 and 4218P.
Yeah, that's information in the metadata, so that just needs to be updated.
Okay, because I kept going, where did I pull that up at? All right.
He just messing with people that are
Yes. Guilty. Thank you.
So we'll move on to item D1 now, board response to monitoring reports. First one item is EL1, expectations of the superintendent. All board members who completed that found that it was in compliance. One comment was, thank you for always being student focused. So would the board like to keep that comment?
Yes.
Yes.
EL11, student conduct and discipline. Again, there were all found in compliance on that. And there was one additional remark. After a conversation with a fellow parent, we wondered if non-sporting teams or groups, for example, band, choir, FBLA, FFA, drama, and the like, also have grade checks and requirements for leaving school for competitions and performances. I know that the sports teams have grade checks for these, wishing I would have thought of and asked the question during the last meeting. So the question is, that the sports teams are held to that standard, are the other groups also held to that standard, the extracurricular? Is that the question? I'm making an assumption that was yours.
That was mine. Yep. Yep. And so I did get this answered by email today, although I forgot my phone at home, so I can't read the response.
You can email right on that if you want.
I know, I thought about that as I was saying that out loud, and that would take some technical skills to get there. So it sounds like, do you want to respond to that before
Absolutely. So you're absolutely accurate that sports teams, they do have the grade checks. However, in speaking with Alejandro, he is working on the system to ensure that other non-sporting teams have the grade checks as well. So right now they do informal grade checks. They'll go on Skyward and look at the grades, but it's not system-wide. So he's actually going to work on that. He'll get back to us within a week, and then we'll report out to the board, probably at the next board meeting where that stands.
But that doesn't just apply to Othello High. That would also apply to Desert Oasis for some events and McFarland,
Absolutely.
like chess and even probably not apply to Math is Cool in 4th and 5th grades.
We can check with Desert Oasis
But-
and McFarland as well.
Just so that it's district-wide, the same policy and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Great comment, great question, I think.
I had a quick question.
Fairness in that.
Aaron, when you say like the grade checks, that would be student-wide, is it the new grade check system? Because it's the system where like you can't have any Fs, or is that just the?
What is the current system? Maybe we should ask that
Yeah.
question.
I can check with Alejandro unless anyone here knows.
Jan?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that one, but we do have a coach present.
Oh yeah, I forgot he was a coach.
I think Pete has the answer as well.
Paul can speak to from the coach's perspective and the teacher perspective, but I'm making an assumption that the question comes from a recent change in policy to say that if you have one F, so no pass, no play is really how it's talked about across the state. It's not the experience that all high school students in the state of Washington have, but there are some communities near us that have practices for several years, and we've jumped on board with it. So one of I think the subtle differences between things like FFA and drama and chess are they don't have sort of the governing policies that exist with WIAA. So if I'm going to take a team to compete in a state tournament, everybody's got to be legal and cleared and ready to play. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there, but I certainly understand the philosophy that if we're going to do that for athletes, we're going to do it for everybody else. So it sounds like there's some work to do at least the high school and middle school to consider those policies.
Yeah, and if we want to get specific, the current policy is that a grade check will come out on Wednesday. At time, the coaches and the athletes will be notified of how many Fs the student has. And that's kind of like their grace period from that Wednesday till Friday. And then the coming Monday, if that student currently has any failing grades, they're ineligible to play. So if a student is fine on a Monday, they have no problems, no grade check so far, that Wednesday grade check comes out, they have any Fs, they're notified of it, and then by the next Monday, if it hasn't been figured out, they're ineligible until they have no Fs again. And I know one of the things that has been brought up has been that some of the aforementioned things are curricular. So as far as like a time for a certain band event or choir or something, making sure that that line between whether or not it's an actual curricular thing or an extracurricular thing is known before there's like a grade check responsibility for it. Because if a student doesn't attend a band or a choir event, it can negatively affect their grade. And so just making sure that that's also something to keep in mind. But if we had less class periods at the high school, we would be on a different grade check anyways. It goes by class period also in the WIA rules. So how many class periods determines how many they'll allow you to have.
So one thing I want to also clarify, that this was a question that was asked by Director Stevenson. There was no directive by the board. There was discussion, we gave our opinions, I think, on things, but just keep that in mind. I don't think the board has tonight said, you need to do this.
No,
So
no,
it's very
right.
clear. I thought it was a very good question, and probably will create some good conversation.
And some of the background as to the different details as to why and those kinds of things are important and imperative as well, but, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that? So,
We do not need to keep that comment in that. I don't think that was important.
all right, you just need
I think it's gonna
clarification tonight.
feed into other
The
conversations.
Review of that policy.
Right, but,
So that's just found in compliance, no comments then, EL 11. All right, we'll move on to item D2. So one GP that was monitored by the board was GP 9, board member conflicts of interest. This was also one, when I last checked, had all the board members found that we as a board were in compliance. There are 4 comments at the end, and this is under the area where it says, in order to maintain its commitment to excellence in governance, to the provisions of this policy, and to improve its own performance, the board commits to the following actions. First comment, be cognizant and respectful, acting with honesty and integrity to comply with GP 9. Number 2, individual board members will remember to recuse themselves when discussion and action involves topics that represent a conflict of interest. Number 3, continue to uphold the highest standards possible. And number 4, each board member will be aware of the guidelines set forth by GP 9 and will hold him or herself personally accountable to the policy. First off, thank you. We have a lot of responses to that, and they're all pretty good. So what do we want to keep?
I think 1 and 2 covers it. It basically says, 3 and 4 basically say the same things that 1 and 2 do. I think that even in that order would be fine.
So Jen recommends keep 1 and 2. What do you think, Ken?
No,
These are our
I agree.
commitments as a board.
Yeah.
Going forward. Okay.
I agree.
Tyson?
Yep.
Mike? Sure. Okay, so we'll keep items 1 and 2 for part 5 of that. Now move on to item D3. We have 3 monitor and response documents. Typically, we don't have Survey Monkeys and monitor and response documents in the same meeting, but because we had that meeting, we didn't have a quorum. I will entertain a motion.
Mr. President, do you need a motion for each of these individually, or can we do?
I think we can do a blanket motion to accept all.
I'd like to motion we accept the monitor and response documents for EL 5, GP 7, and GP 12.
Motion by Director Garza to accept all.
Second?
Second by Director Stevenson. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Item E1. Item E1, policy review. The only policy, and I'm just trying to make this easier. As we know, as a board, if we have a change to a policy, then we submit it to Othello. She'll put them side by side. there were no changes to these, other than the annual board agenda, GP 7.1, so I'm just going to jump to that one. Am I right on that? Elliot, that was the only one? Okay. Didn't know if we got anything later. So if you scroll down to, looks like the first change is Monday, September 30th. And that would be special meeting at 6:15, that's our facilities workshop. Monday, October 7th, special meeting at 7:30, policy governance training for potential student reps. There was another item came up, I believe. Was there something, Thalia, that you had? Oh, okay, so the Ludicaga visit, there's a conflict on here. What was the date of that?
Right now it's scheduled November 5th, and that's conferences.
Scheduled on conferences. So the question was, different week, or maybe there's a different day that we could do that. Do we have suggestions for that? Does the district have suggestions for the board that they'd like to consider? After would be better. So that would be, obviously Tuesday is going to, the 5th is going to be just the week before our regular meeting. Then we typically discuss our visit at that meeting, and not that we couldn't put it off to the second meeting of the month, that's possible. So what would the board like to do? Keep that on a Tuesday, move it to a different day? Same week?
Can we move it a week early instead? I mean, as opposed to a week later, because we've got Osd annual conference that we'll be discussing at that regular meeting. We'll be coming back right before that. It's, I just think bumping it to that next meeting is not good. And while we're discussing that, have those that are running for school board been notified of this potential training for them to go to in Bellevue? I know I'm throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you.
So
I can check with Jen Perez
Okay.
and see, and then get back with the president.
So what about Thursday of that same week rather than Tuesday? We can maybe give them a first and second
That would be great.
Option?
for us, and
Yeah.
if Tuesday works, or if Thursday of that week works, or Tuesday of the prior week works. Regional meeting in the evening, that's when the regional meeting is in the evening, but
Oh.
don't know if that affects us during the day or not. Am I getting nods from everyone for the Thursday?
I'm okay with that.
Sure.
Okay.
I think the morning of the 7th would be fine.
And then the Tuesday before that would be the 29th of October. Okay, so what would be the preference? Week before on Tuesday or the same week on Thursday?
Mine is the week before. I think either would be fine, though.
Well, I'll just throw them both out and they can say what they
Yeah.
prefer, I guess.
Yeah.
See what-
Or if they have another date altogether that they would prefer.
Unless there's a conflict, I say we just stick with one of those two. I mean, if there's a direct conflict of something they have going on, then on both days, then we can discuss
It
it.
could be their daughter's birthday and it would just not be good. Who knows?
But they still go to work.
Just
Yes, but it's just added stress of having to do
Oh.
a party the night of and board meeting that board,
I feel like it's your daughter's birthday tomorrow.
no. No, it was just an example. I was trying to come up with something.
Okay, so then there will be another change of this that will come in our next board
Right.
meeting.
Right.
So it doesn't look like there's even anything for us to vote on for changes in policies. We're just leaving them
Yes, just
I-
so that if we could make sure that those that are running for office know about both the WASDA regional meeting and the WASDA conference, that they're informed to make sure that, since we consistently see one in the audience and others are hopefully watching at home, they'll hopefully already know those dates. I'm sorry, Ken, I think you had something else.
No, are we done with GP 7.1, the calendar yet? I got
Well,
something for after
We've
it,
talked
so.
about some things to discuss on GP 7.1, and we had some additions, and then we just added another one, but it'll come back next time because it was not in this revision.
Okay. I would just like to go back to EL5 really quick, if that's okay.
Did you submit a change or something?
No, I didn't submit a change, but I would like to keep it going because it was mentioned last time at the meeting. And this was EL5 related to the bullet number 3, a failure to allocate no more than 80% of the district's projected gross revenues to compensation and benefits, including consultants. It was the consultants was the gray area that it didn't include. And I know we kind of all looked at each other and said, oh, we need to look at policy review for that. So I'd like to keep that one up to look at it further. I would just like to know the numbers for consultants, or I know you mentioned there was some gray areas there for consultants.
Like, what is the definition of a
Yes.
consultant?
I think
Yes.
she was looking for the board to define that so that she could share that with us. Was that
Okay,
correct?
Yeah,
so,
that would be great, just to have that line of, what information are you really looking for?
I would just like to keep that one active, otherwise
We'll
it'll be
forget
next
about it.
year
Yeah,
when it comes back up.
definitely. So, reminder that if you do have any recommended changes, make sure that's just submitted to Talia, then she can put them up side by side.
So Ken, is that something you think you can come up with a definition of consultants?
I will take a look at that and have it for the next one.
And then, this is still kind of back at GP 7.1, how, I don't know if we've ever defined, how are PSE going to be notified of our meeting with them? Because we haven't specifically asked for something, and I just would like that to be defined for us.
I know Minnie was saying that she was gonna send out an email to her PSC chapter, but I could definitely send something out as of tomorrow.
I think that would be great to also come from the district and not just from the PSC president. So, perfect. And maybe stating that there'll be refreshments. A church function always helps to say that for attendance. Not to separate church and state, but that's reality of people, sorry.
So, for policy review, there was no vote to make any modifications. One thing we do want is EL5 and GP 7.1 will come back in the next meeting with, hopefully both with revision of recommendations. Okay? No need for executive session tonight, so we'll move on to item G1, upcoming events.
Since voter registration is listed here as a National Voter Registration Day, is there a link on the website and Facebook groups as to how and where for people to register and the details that way?
Is that your business?
Microphone to action holders.
So I actually have something scheduled to go out tomorrow for National Voter Registration Day on our Facebook page, so like the OSD Facebook page, but not on the board Facebook page, but that's your decision if you'd like me to add something on the board Facebook page as well. We do not have anything on the website, but we can add something.
I think more avenues than just Facebook is always better, and more avenues than just one page. I know that the district's website or Facebook page has more viewers than our board page, but I think that's definitely valuable to have it on both. And definitely on the district website would be my opinion. I mean, more places we can put it is better. Is it just a link that they can just sign up right then?
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks. Yes. Great.
Okay. We'll move on to item G2, board self-assessment of meetings. Everyone's in. So the first item, the agenda was well planned to focus on the real work of the board. 6 said commendable. The board followed its agenda. It did not allow itself to get sidetracked. 5 said commendable, 1 said good. The board's deliberations and decision-making processes were public. 6 said commendable. All board members participated in discussion. No one dominated. 3 said commendable, 3 said good. Members listened attentively, avoiding side conversations. 5 said commendable, 1 said good. Under governance principles, board actions occurred at a policy level rather than an operational level. 5 said yes, or 6 said yes, I'm sorry. The board agenda referenced policy about each topic that was discussed. 6 said yes. The board chair helped the board efficiently conduct its meetings. 6 said yes. The board supported the superintendent in any reasonable interpretation of his policies. 6 said yes. New or modified policies. Did the board write a new or modifying existing policies during this meeting? The answer to that is no. And for both items, the board found not applicable. Overall, 4 said it was a commendable meeting. 2 said good. Well done, board. Good meeting. And business is concluded.